Hey there, and welcome to the Reclamation Room. I'm Ashana, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a space for women reclaiming themselves after narcissistic abuse. If you've ever felt like you were too much or not enough, or both at the same time, you're in the right place. I created this podcast because I know what it's like to lose yourself in overgiving, overperforming, and still wondering why it never felt like love. I've walked through trauma, toxic relationships, and the long road of self-reclamation, and I'm here to walk with you. In this podcast, we'll explore what it means to come home to yourself after the confusion and chaos of narcissistic abuse. Some episodes will be solo, others will include guest interviews. All of them will be honest, grounded, and deeply compassionate. So, whether you're just realizing what you've lived through, or you've been on this path and you're ready for the next layer of your healing, you are welcome here. This is not about perfection. This is about reclamation. Hey guys, so welcome back to the Reclamation Room. I have a kind of exciting story to share, I guess. I mean, it's exciting for me. I'm not sure if other people are going to be like, oh my gosh, this is the episode of my dreams. But it was really special for me to kind of connect some dots here. This is going to be a story about me quitting caffeine, which was a literal lifelong addiction for me. So I had caffeine starting in my bottle as, 11 or so months as a baby. I've kind of traced this back to the time frame of some memories that I have drinking coffee as a baby. People have asked me like, oh my gosh, why would your mom do that? And I'm not in my mom's brain. I don't know for sure. I don't have the exact answer here, but it was just kind of culturally in our family. I mean, sweet tea was a thing, unsweet tea was a thing. Obviously, black tea has caffeine in it, and coffee was just another one of those things. And so I grew up having it. And so it became comfort for me, as these things do. So this episode is going to be a bit about my journey of quitting caffeine. And I tried many times, failed, was partially successful, went back to it psychologically, still used it as a crutch. And then finally, this coming home of realizing what exactly caffeine meant to me and why I kept going back and why I'm okay to put it down. And also why that doesn't need to be something to shy away from or be afraid of or ashamed of. And so the big ball drop moment for me was when I realized that this addiction to caffeine started from a place of me thinking that it was no big deal. It was not that harmful in the long run. It was temporary relief or temporary feelings in the moment, and then long term realizing what it was actually doing to my body. So, the reason I feel this is applicable here on this podcast is because I finally realized, oh my gosh, I did the same thing in narcissistic relationships. So, you hear this saying, when it's good, it's really good, but when it's bad, it's really bad. And I have a feeling if you're listening to this, you can probably relate. So I'm going to just take you on a small journey here. Hopefully, you can get something from this. We'll see. So, starting with my addiction to caffeine, it wasn't just the flavor of coffee for me. It wasn't just, I need to cut back on my sugar, or I really like the way that it tastes when I add these creamers. Although for a moment, that was another layer of the addiction that I had to step away from. But it was deeper than just a caffeine buzz or a hit of energy. And I've actually chatted with my boss about this. My day job, I work as a couples recovery coach for partners recovering from sex and porn addiction. And one of the books that I read in training for this job was called Who Am I by Stephen Rice. And it talks about the 16 basic human desires. And so I was chatting with my bosses about this journey of quitting caffeine and how the addiction process really took hold in my brain. And I was challenging these belief systems and recognizing the triggers for me of like, wow, I really want coffee right now. And this had actually gone beyond coffee to energy drinks, but just starting for now, my gateway drug to caffeine addiction was coffee. And my boss actually asked me, like, which basic desires was this seemingly fulfilling for you? And I had to think about that for a moment. And I realized that it sounds crazy because caffeine is energy and get up and go and motivation. And what it actually brought for me was a sense of what I thought was tranquility or calm or order amidst chaos. So taking it back a little bit here,
we got to remember, looking at my story, that I grew up in chaos. I was not always with my mother. I was not with my father at all until I was in, I think, fourth grade. So I would stay with babysitters, with grandparents. And then eventually in foster care, I would stay with random strangers, and then it was moving, moving, moving. So there was just chaos all around me. There was never a sense of stability and security. And the one thing that always stood out to me, of course, as a 7-year-old child going into the foster system, was that I felt like I had been taken from my mother. That was my sense of security. Even if it was unstable, that was my home. And so remembering my mom would put coffee in my bottle, and I would wake up early and lay on the couch, and I would watch Scooby Doo and have my bottle. And I had this blanket that had ribbon on the ends of it, and I would rub the ribbon with my fingers, and I just felt so at peace. And so when I moved in with my dad, there were these new rules. I could not have coffee, I could not have soda, but we did have sweet tea. So, growing up in the South, of course, most families that I've met at least have a gallon of sweet tea in the refrigerator. So, you're still getting caffeine. And then going into high school, of course, we had the drink machines and we had the sodas, and I was able to maintain a steady intake of caffeine, which I did not realize, of course, at that age, that that was caffeine. And so, flash forward to 17 years old, and I'm out on my own for the first time, and I don't have my dad's rules anymore, and I'm able to have coffee. And I felt so grown up and so independent and so at peace and at home with, yes, I can go in the kitchen and I can make a cup of coffee and flavor it and just sit and enjoy it. And it brought such a sense of relief and home to me amidst any kind of confusion or turmoil. So we have this sense of false tranquility that it brought me because, of course, what it's actually doing is it's a stimulant. And so it's causing my heart to race inevitably. And it's causing a little bit more stress hormones in my body. Didn't go out and get blood tests or anything, but we know it's an upper. That's what caffeine is. And so it made sense logically to me looking back of course it was giving me that sense of heart racing, panicky anxiety, which was my baseline as a child. I didn't ever have a sense of peace and stillness. Stillness was terrifying for me. So maintaining that baseline state of slight anxiety felt like home. And then on top of that, now I'm independent, and it's giving me a sense of freedom and being able to assert myself and who I am in the world. And this is kind of crazy. And I know this is a little bit off topic for what we usually talk about on here, but I'll get to the point, I promise. We'll just get there in a roundabout way. So, I also had a bit of an identity formed in this caffeine intake. And so, just like there is a stoner culture, some people smoke in this way and some people smoke in this way, and you have like different cultures of people that you hang out with. I had my phase of that too, but to me, there was also a coffee culture, and it helped me to feel like I belonged somewhere. And like, okay, this is a life raft amidst all these possibilities out in the world. I was this person who had been through narcissistic abuse and so much trauma and so much pain. Criticism was terrifying for me. I had crippling social anxiety. I had no idea who I actually was. I did not feel like I had a stable sense of self. And so I would read all these books or I would watch movies sometimes, and I would cling to these characteristics of the people I met. And so I was piecing together bits of my personality, item by item, and caffeine became a part of that. And I carried that with me through my adulthood. Of course, I had my gym rat phase, and so then you have your pre-workout. Then I was a mother, and I was the caffeinated mom getting through the 8-month sleep regression. And then I had my own business, and it was go, go, go. And a lot of times it could have been an 18-hour workday. I mean, just nonstop. And I had an online boutique, and I literally named my group on Facebook. It was called the Caffeinated Cactus. And I would give out free Starbucks packets in all of my packages that I mailed out to my customers. And it was just a vibe, right? So caffeine for me ran very, very deep. And even in moments when I would feel like my mind was racing or I would be having a bit of anxiety, my go to would be to go make a cup of coffee or to go through the drive-through and get a cup of coffee, and everything slowed down for a moment. But looking back, I'm realizing, okay, in those small moments, to me, this addiction, I would not have said that it was an addiction because it was a ritual of comfort for me. It brought me a feeling of being connected and being safe. And so it felt harmless to me. In fact, not just harmless, it felt like it was bringing me benefit. It was bringing me relief. And in the big picture of things, I don't really think I was worried too much about the long-term effects of caffeine or the half-life or how it builds up in your system or what it could do to your cortisol levels, your gut, like just things that it can throw out of whack in your body. And I feel like in the moment, I wasn't really thinking about those things because it would require admitting that caffeine had become a crutch for me and maybe something that I should take a look at. And so, flash forward now, I started to realize, okay, and this is after like doing juice fasts in a safe way and keto dieting for a minute. I did the paleo, I did the Whole30. Also recovered from eating disorders like anorexia and orthorexia. So this is a long, long journey of feeling at peace in my body or just coming home to being in my body and recognizing what is happening. And I remember I started realizing, wow, when I drink caffeine, I actually don't feel good. I'm actually noticing that my heart is racing and I feel worse. And sometimes it gives me a headache rather than helping me not have a caffeine headache. I noticed that my circadian rhythm had completely flipped around to the point where I wouldn't go to bed until like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. But then I wasn't really functioning very well until 4 o'clock the next afternoon. And so I started doing a little bit of research. And for me, looking at it, I realized that this caffeine intake was not actually harmless like I thought because it was spiking my anxiety. It was keeping my nervous system in the fight or flight mode, which was mimicking the hypervigilance that I thought I had healed from the narcissistic abuse. And so even though I'm not looking over my shoulder or waiting for the shoe to drop, in typical abusive situations or relational situations, I would turn back to that same familiar feeling of the heart racing and constantly being on high alert. And then I would experience a crash in the afternoon. I would be irritable. I would feel depleted, which then caused me to feel like I was at my worst. So I would be triggered more easily. I had much less patience. The headache would kick in. Then I would have to go back to the caffeine and grab another cup. And so this would be a cycle. And it got to the point where quitting not only felt impossible, but like it felt like there was no point. And when I read this book or I listened to the audiobook called Caffeine Blues, which if you're not a person who wants to face anything about caffeine in yourself, do not read that book. I don't recommend it. But if you're curious and you want to learn more, or maybe you're like, what the heck is she talking about? Caffeine Blues, I'll link it in the show notes. It actually, I think it was a bit sensationalized, if I'm being honest. So, kind of overdramatic is what it felt like for me. But the information was shared in a way that I was like, okay, some of this makes sense. And so I dove into podcasts, I dove into audiobooks, YouTube videos, just researching and immersing myself in quitting caffeine. There was a lot of Reddit threads. I mean, when I get into something, I go deep. Like I go down the rabbit hole, I take in everything I feel like I need to take in, and then I sit with it and I feel where I'm at. And I realized that quitting caffeine, which of course for me in the past I had tried to quit, it would come with withdrawal headaches, it would come with brain fog, it would come with the loss of the ritual and like the feeling of emptiness when I would walk into the kitchen and not know what to do with myself. It actually was like mourning a part of myself that I wasn't ready to let go of. So I just want to say here, by the way, like if you're someone who drinks caffeine, this is not in any way meant to judge you. It's not about saying, hey, you're bad for doing this. You shouldn't be doing this. This is bad for you. I just want to emphasize here, this is really about me. And this is about how caffeine was a coping mechanism for me and just realizing how it kept me stuck and drawing the line here of the cycle that I was going through with caffeine was keeping me stuck, just like toxic relationships kept me stuck. And so this really helped me dig into and conceptualize these emotional hooks and the needs that I felt like I was getting met, in the sense of false tranquility, false order, false connection, and how breaking free from that led me to realizing what I was actually doing to myself and things that actually were healthy for me, versus turning to things that were potentially unhealthy, or the extent to which I was drinking it was unhealthy. Because I had gotten to the point of, like, some days I would be drinking 600 milligrams of caffeine in a day, which, again, do not recommend, 0 out of 10. But it is what it is, caffeine tolerance grows, and that's where I was at. So again, none of this is meant to judge anyone whatsoever. So I want to draw the line here to narcissistic relationships and relational abuse, because this is where the real aha moment came for me. So I want to think for a moment about how many of us have left someone who is narcissistically abusive, and thinking, if it was a partner, maybe they were charming, maybe they were manipulative, but either way, maybe it was a parent. Maybe you couldn't really distance yourself from that parent in a way that you needed to maintain your own independence and your own opinions out in the world. Maybe it was a boss, maybe it was a friend. Regardless of who it is, there's always confusion involved. There's always a sense of, again, the cycling. Maybe you can feel seen and heard and validated in one moment, and then you could feel unimportant, invalidated, or even shattered the next moment. But we find ourselves going back to it. Or at least I did. I did over and over and over. And each time, of course, I would feel like the world was crumbling around me, and I would be just shaken to my core. Like, how does this person not see and comprehend what they are doing to me? Like, I don't understand how they can't see how awful this is. But I would forgive, and I would listen to words that made it easier. It felt to me to go back, and I would convince myself that it was harmless in the big picture. So maybe it was extremely earth shattering in that moment, and then I would kind of smooth over it and go back again, and the cycle would begin again, and then I would be right back in that same place the next time. But again, I would always think, when it's good, it's really good. It's just when it's bad that it's really bad. So sure, there were red flags in the relationship, and I would just kind of let them go by and look at them and say, well, but the good times make up for it. This is just a rough patch. So again, in the moment, I'm treating these things as if they're harmless, and I'm not looking at the big picture. So correlating this to caffeine here, let's draw the line, let's draw the connection. The relationship was actually harming me under the surface in ways that there was no way I would have been able to ignore that forever and still stay healthy. So over time, these cycles, the doubting myself, the constantly being criticized, the constantly having to compete with other things for attention and affection and validation and praise, and all the things that I was obviously very hungry for, but I was looking for someone else to fill those needs, had me in a state of less and less self-esteem, more and more self-criticism, a higher sense of doubt in myself to handle things, and also doubt that there was any hope for happiness or betterment in the future. My standards got slowly lower and lower for myself and for my life. But also the stress hormones caught up to me. I mean, it got to the point where I couldn't eat at times. I couldn't sleep at times. I would have physical pain going on in my body and just felt exhausted all of the time. And so this relationship, even with the cycles, was providing me with a false sense of tranquility. Because as long as we could do our nightly routine in the evenings and watch a movie together or play video games together and eat dinner, then everything was going to be okay. Or we would reach those highs of love bombing after an argument, after a downswing of the cycle, and things would be okay for a week or two. That felt like order amidst all the emotional chaos. And so that also connected me to a really twisted version of home, because there was the familiarity there of the chaos and the confusion. And of course, that was echoing the past of the childhood wounds. And so looking at that and realizing, like, gosh, how could I keep doing something that's so bad for me and completely overlook that fact? Because in the moment, I'm like, okay, well, this is harmless in comparison to the big picture here. The big picture being, I need this relationship to work because fill in the blank here. So some of the things for me were like, everyone in town. We've already had this relationship that everyone knows about, and everyone thinks that we're just this perfect couple, this power couple, and it would be embarrassing for things not to work out, or it would be difficult to separate our finances out at this point because we're already this deep in on all of these things. It didn't really matter what I could explain it away with, because if you look at it at its core, the cycles were addictive because it was an intermittent reinforcement that just kept me hooked. It kept reeling me in. And so it would be like crumbs of affection mixed with criticism. And then there would be this like violent low, which would swing back up into this ridiculous high. And so it was just like the caffeine jolt that was followed by the crash. And then I would have to go back for the next hit of caffeine. So in trauma recovery, of course, we call this the trauma bond. It's the pullback to a familiar sense of pain because in that moment for us, it's masquerading as comfort. And thankfully, quitting caffeine and all that entailed actually showed me this pattern on a deeper level, because I would feel really great for a minute after going back. So this is, the coffee or the X here. I would feel great for a minute because things were okay and we had patched it over and we had smoothed it over and I had gotten that hit. But the long-term damage was there under the surface and it was building up silently and I didn't realize it. So this could be like the self-worth eroding away, the chronic stress, the isolation, and leaving that person, leaving the relationship felt like withdrawal, because I would be in this like crisis state of loneliness and doubt and craving to go back to that old normal routine because I had been in it for years at that point. I did not know how to be by myself. I did not know how to sit in my feelings. I would wander around the house until 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning thinking I should just go back. What have I done? But ultimately, I had to realize that staying in that was the real harm. Like that was the real damage being done under the surface because it was chipping away slowly at my spirit over time. So, looking at what quitting caffeine actually taught me about reclaiming my life after everything I've been through. I mean, I've left narcissistic relationships. I'm here talking about it. I'm sharing my story. I'm inviting others to come and share their story. I mean, we look at this from so many angles, and a big lesson that I learned in this whole caffeine journey is that awareness is everything. I eventually had to get like bone deep, soul level honest about why I was turning to it. And I don't just mean the habit. I don't just mean going through with, let's go make a cup of coffee and have the warm cup in our hands and feel the frothy oat milk against my lips and feel the warmth of it and smell the aroma of it. I mean, there's all these layers to, if you've ever quit anything, I think that you know what I'm talking about here. There's layers to quitting the habit, just like quitting smoking cigarettes. You finish eating, you want to go outside and have a cigarette because that was your habit or whenever it was for you. But I had to look at the emotional void that I had been filling with these things. So it's the same for coffee, for caffeine, as it was for the relationship. I had to look at, why did I keep going back? Was it a fear of being alone? Was it a fear of not being able to sit with my feelings and not being able to feel the stillness that was terrifying for me because I'd never had that? Was it a belief that I didn't actually deserve better? Maybe I was self-sabotaging when I got too close to feeling good in a way that I had never experienced before. And so journaling through this process helped me a lot with that, because I had to sit and think about, what is this harmless choice actually costing me? And so looking at, I'm not sleeping well. A lot of times I'm not eating well because this is stifling my appetite. And so I know my gut is getting messed up and now I'm having these other aches and pains. So I had to get really honest with where I was at and then decide from there, is this something that I want to change? Do I want to keep doing this? I do have an option here. No one's forcing me to quit. Do I really want to? And then I had to learn also to replace the ritual with something that was actually nourishing and love bringing and life giving to me. So quitting cold turkey and not having anything there. I mean, of course, we could do that. That's one method. But for me, I decided to look into what a new routine would look like. And I actually treated myself to a collection of caffeine-free organic herbal teas. And I got this really cute booth shelf to store them on so that I can see them and I walk in the kitchen and I see them, and it's a reminder of like, oh yes, I love this. This is good. This is comforting. This brings me happiness and joy. And next on my list is actually a new kettle, because I've had the same kettle for years and years and years now. And I picked out a really cute one that makes me happy and brings me joy. And I'm excited to have that and to be able to sit with a cup of herbal tea that is not overstimulating to my system. And I'm starting to notice the small changes, like, I really like this one with chamomile and honey and vanilla. And I can notice these small notes of flavors, but I also notice the sense of stillness and calm that it brings me. And that's something, again, with that relationship or in past relationships that I've had, I didn't even notice the small things happening in my nervous system because I was so keyed up all the time that I was numbed out to a lot of what was going on in my body. So replacing this coffee, this caffeine, this energy drink that I had started drinking also, which is, I said we were going to get into it. We didn't get into it. It's a whole nother story. I would not recommend. It just did not feel good in my body. But replacing these with herbal tea, gratitude, a walk in nature, anything that is healthy to me, in my perspective of healthy, that means what is nourishing to me, what feels good, what else can bring me a sense of home, a sense of connection, a sense of tranquility, a sense of independence without the crash that comes later. And so we're looking at recovery here in terms of the trauma bond, replacing the comfort of going back to that person or being in cycles with that person with healthy connections. So for some people, this could look like art therapy, or some people go to yoga. Some people have a support group that they take part in, and they have friendships that help build them up. So I started reminding myself of home in positive ways. And I started to look back on the memories that I had of my mom that did not have anything to do with caffeine, but I could look back on them and say, okay, there's other memories here that I have. Let me get in touch with that little girl. Let me get in touch with what that felt like. And I started to foster that within myself and then notice what feels like this in other situations. And a big, huge, like, step 3 here was really embracing the discomfort of going through withdrawal. Because even though I weaned myself slowly, and I did add in some supplements that I read about in Caffeine Blues and some others that I learned through my own nutrition education, is you're gonna end up having likely headaches, fatigue, mood swings. There are things that can help with that. It doesn't have to be cold turkey. It doesn't have to be being absolutely fucking miserable for months on end and then going right back to it. I had to learn how to sit with the discomfort without trying to medicate it away, but also having compassion for myself and saying, what can I do in this moment to help myself feel even incrementally better? Or if it doesn't feel better, at least to know that I'm supporting myself the best way that I can. Like, yes, this is difficult, but this is temporary and I can get through this. And I'm going to show myself that I love myself while I'm going through this. And so leaving those relationships that were unhealthy for me, they brought the same waves of grief and doubt and what felt like sickness. I mean, like trembling sometimes in my body and racing in my heart and this empty feeling in my gut, like I was about to get in trouble for something. But writing that out and being with myself and staying composed, staying steadfast to my decision, that is what built my resilience. And so this really taught me a big lesson, and quitting caffeine circled me back around to that of the pain of change being short term, but the pain of staying stuck in that stuff, the unhealthy things, the coping mechanisms, whatever it is that you apply here, the pain of staying stuck in that is forever. It builds under the surface. So if we can get over that hurdle of making the change and being with ourselves in that pain of making the change, over time it does get better. The pain does fade, and you're actually better able to look back and see the pain that you were going through all along that you had somehow become numb to or been desensitized to or convinced yourself that it wasn't so bad. So my last tip here that I learned in quitting caffeine is to celebrate the wins, even if they're really, really, really small. So I'll go ahead and be like super full disclosure here. One of these days of weaning off caffeine, I weaned myself way too quickly. I cut my intake in half instead of, like a quarter of the amount of milligrams of caffeine I had had the day before. And when I say I was sick, I mean, it hurt to exist. It hurt to think. It hurt to move. I was nauseous. I was so sick, and I just wrote it out and was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to cut back this quickly. That's okay. And then the next day, I kept weaning and I cut it back smaller increments. But my first day of having 0 caffeine, I was like, holy shit, I did it. Like, this is so amazing. I'm going to treat myself to something and I'm going to celebrate here. And I did. I bought another box of tea that I had been eyeing and it was in my cart. And I was like, I'm going to try this one. And it was good. And looking back and remembering, like, getting that relationship out of my life for good was very, very similar because I reclaimed my space there too. I started to treat myself to things that felt more like me. And it took me a minute to get back into that celebration of me and that intimacy with myself because it felt for a time like nothing brought me joy anymore. And I had to learn to celebrate those small wins because the acts of self love, they actually start to rewire our brains from the grip that trauma held over it for so long. So I'm going to wrap it up here because I think I've probably said enough here that hopefully maybe there's something you could take from this. But just know that if you're listening and you're nodding along and you're like, okay, yep, some of this makes sense to me. I just want you to know it doesn't matter if it's caffeine, it doesn't matter if it's a toxic ex or if it's some other harmless habit that you have and you've realized, okay, this is holding me back from being my best self. I just want you to know, like, there's no shame in that because we all have things that we want to improve. We all have things that we're like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't really aligned with who I want to be. And that's been a big theme for me lately is learning to sit and look at what I've got going on and, okay, do I really want to be doing this? Like, is this a piece of me that I want to take forward? And just remember, complex trauma causes us to seek safety in things that are familiar, even when they're harmful to us. It doesn't make sense, no, but from the scope of looking at it in terms of you've kept yourself safe, it makes all the sense in the world. And I commend you for that because you got through it. But I just want to remind you that breaking free from whatever it is that you want to break free from, that is where the actual tranquility is. That is where the actual calm is. And that's within yourself because you can find that piece of you if you are determined, if you are committed to loving yourself and seeing it through, having self-compassion and reminding yourself of why you're doing the thing. So that's your authentic self. That's the person who is completely unbound. And I just want to say I'm here rooting for her every step of the way. Thank you so much for listening to my caffeine story. I know this was a little bit different from what we usually dive into, but I would love to hear if you have any feedback, if anything resonated for you, if there's anything I said that you're like, actually, here's another nuance to this. Feel free to comment. Let me know. I love getting feedback on this. And if you wouldn't mind sharing this with a friend who you think might want to hear it or leaving a review, it actually helps the podcast grow. And I do want to give you a quick teaser for the next episode. We're going to have another guest on. Her name is Margaret, and she specializes in helping women who have dated the same kind of guy over and over and over, get out of those cycles, realize why you're doing it. I'm so excited to have her on the show and for you guys to hear it because the things that she has to say really make sense in a different way. Even if you've heard it before, you're going to be like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. So super excited. And in the meantime, let me know how your habits are looking for you. Is there something that you want to let go of and you're unsure of where to start? Maybe you can come and share it in our weekly women's circle. We have a group call every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. I would love to have you there. It's completely free. You can email me at ashana@yournorthstarrising.com. I'll share it in the show notes and you can register for your spot in our weekly women's circle. Okay. Thanks for being here. Refill your cup, make it one that nourishes you. Take care, and remember, you are worthy of peace.
Thanks for spending time in the Reclamation Room. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if this supported you, consider sharing it or leaving a review. You're not alone, and your reclamation is sacred.